Hey guys, welcome to Geo with Mutsuku. In today's video, we're covering the topic of rural settlements, right? This video will also have some past paper activities to prepare for upcoming exams. Under this section, we're going to do the study of settlements. We're going to look at rural settlements and rural settlement issues, right? As outlined in the exam guideline. Uh, Before we dive deeper, we need to understand what is a settlement, right? If you look at the image on the side, you can see that it is a place where people live. This is a settlement, right? It is a place where people live. It includes economic activities, right? Um, Buildings and transport networks. As you can see, there are buildings here. There's transport networks, there's roads, we have a harbor here. I'm sure there's sea transportation as well. It also has economic activities, right? There are shops, there are services being provided to people. Okay. Now here's our definition, right? A place where people live, which includes buildings, economic activities, and transport networks, right? So you must give us all these to get your 2 marks for defining a place where people live. As you can see, it includes buildings, right? There is economic activities there, and there is transport networks, or you can say there is communication networks. Now that we have defined settlement as a place where people live, which includes buildings, economic activities, and transport networks, we need to know how to define these two, right? Site and situation. This is very important, right? A site is the physical or the exact land on which the settlement is built, the exact land. Okay, if you look at this diagram, right in the center of site, this is the exact land where the settlement is built, right? This is where we have our buildings, on this exact land. Okay, now situation is the location of the settlement site. You can see that the location of this site in the center in relation to the surrounding area. In relation to what? The surrounding. This is the surrounding area. You can see that if you were to give the location of this site in relation to the surrounding, where you describe what's in the surrounding, maybe you tell me that there's mountains, right? This site is close to mountains, right? You're giving me the location in by describing the surrounding. That's a situation, right? The location of a site in relation to the surrounding. Here's the site in the center. But if I describe its location using the surrounding area, right? Now that's a situation, right? There's a situation. Now there are various reasons why early settlers, people back then, why they chose to settle where they settled, right? One of them could be because of water supply, right? Some of them would locate close to a water source if water was scarce, right? If there's no water in the area, it only makes sense for people to locate where maybe there's a river, right? If the rest of the area is dry, obviously you want to settle close to where there's a water source, right? But if there's too much water now, if there's too much flooding, people will settle away from the water. See that? Another one is fuel, right? Wood can be used as a source of fuel, right? It can be used for coal, even for making fires, even for building as well, right? And then farming land, right? Fertile soil, right, is one of the most important side factors. Okay, people will settle where there's fertile soil for farming, right? And then there's shelter, right? One of the reasons was shelter. Some of them would settle in the middle of a slope, right, to be protected from strong winds. Some of them would be on top of a slope for defense reasons, right? Obviously, if you hold a higher ground during times of war, right, you are safer, right? You have what can I say, an advantage over someone who's climbing up a hill. Like, here's my mountain here. If you are here at the top, right, and then there's someone in the bottom here, right? Obviously, the person at the top will have an advantage, right? So some of them were at the top of a hill for defense reasons, okay? Some of them would settle in the middle or lower, right, to be sheltered from strong winds, okay? And then situations, a settlement with good access to natural resources. Okay, some of the things are blocked from here. Okay, but a situation is all about having good access to our natural resources, right? As you can see here, right? Here's the situation. Here's the factors affecting what? Situation. I Okay, let's talk about factors influencing site, right? The first one I want us to talk about is water, right? Let's talk about water. Now, areas where water is scarce, right? Where there's less water, you are going to find nucleated settlements, right? Nucleated means the settlements were going to be clustered, right? They were going to be clusters now, clustered. Now, let me draw here just to demonstrate, okay? Let's say there was no water here, right? And the only area with water was this one, right? We're making an example. Let's say this black dot that I'm drawing here was the only part where there was water, and then the rest of the area was just dry. Obviously, people would choose to circle around the water. So you can see I'm putting those black dots there, right? They will be nucleated, they will be clustered around the area where there is water, right? So areas where water was scarce, where there was less water, there was nucleated settlements, right? A lot of people would cluster around, right, the water source, okay? There will be settlements clustered around the water source. They will be nucleated if water was scarce, right? We know that nowadays this site factor is no longer as important because we now have pipes which transport water for long distances, right? But back then, right, people would cluster next to a water source. Now let me remove this and do another drawing, right? Let me remove this. Let me remove this. Now, in areas where water was available, where there was a lot of water, there was dispersed settlements, right? Remember, just think about it. If water is all over, there is no need for people to be clustered in one area. They can just circle wherever they want. One person can be here. You can see my black dot. Another person can circle somewhere there. Another one somewhere there. Because water is available everywhere, right? Where water was available, there was dispersed settlements, and this is settlement number 1, this is settlement number 2, this is number 3. Dispersed means they are far from each other, right? So when water is scarce, there was nucleated settlements. People were clustered, right, around the water source. But when water was everywhere, right, when water was everywhere, people would be dispersed. The settlements would be dispersed. They would be far apart because there's water everywhere. There is no need to be clustered in one area, right? Um, let's look at some of the things here, okay? But obviously, people would not locate too close to the river because remember, rivers can overflow, right? They can overflow. Another side factor was fertile soil, right? Was fertile what? Soil for farming, right? Areas where there's fertile soil, there will be settlements. People will settle where there's fertile soil, so they can use it for what? For farming. For what? For farming. Okay, this means that areas where there was fertile soil would have nucleated settlements, right? People would cluster in areas. There would be a lot of people where there's fertile soil, right? Um, Another one is fuel, right? Remember, I just spoke about fuel. Wood is a source of fuel, right? So you can see here on this diagram, it says wood gives fuel and building material. So obviously, people will cycle there, so it is easier for them to access their fuel, right? Access the wood, which is a source of what? Fuel. Another one is building material, right? As you can see here, wood gives fuel and building material. So back then, people would cycle closer to those sources, okay? Um, this part is blocked off, but it says not facing, right? Facing to the north. You can see this is a valley, right? If you go back to our topic on is it on geomorphology? Is it geomorphology? No. On climate and weather. Yes, climate and weather aspect, right? The situation of the slope in relation to the sun's rays. We know that in the southern hemisphere, north-facing slopes are warmer. Right? So that's one of the side factors, right? People will cycle on the warm north-facing slopes in the southern hemisphere. Okay, another side factor which I didn't mention here on the side is accessibility and communication, right? Because back then, right, there were no bridges, so people would cycle close to a shallow point in the river. A shallow point, like it's a point where the river is not deep, right? They would cycle in a shallow point so that they can be able to cross cross the river and access another side, right? Let's say there was a settlement here. Let me just draw here in black. A, can you see where at A? Let's say there was a settlement here and then there's a settlement at B. Now, for accessibility, people would not settle close to here. You can see here there's a the body of water is quite large here, right? Maybe it might be even deep. So they would settle in a shallow point like here. You can see here. It might be easier for them to cross and access the other side, right? So they would settle in the shallow point of the river for communication, right? In order to communicate or in order to cross the river easier, okay? Um, and another side factor was relief, right, or topography of the land, right? You can see it says hilltops make good defensive site, right? So if people use some of the people used to locate at the top of the hill, right? They had the settlement at the top, right? This gives an advantage when there's maybe a war, okay? Because if you're at the top and someone is at the bottom, obviously the person at the top has an advantage, okay? So some of the side factors was relief or topography, right, for defense. And we know that during times of flooding, right, the low-lying areas are the ones which are most prone to flooding. So if you're at the top, so you also defended there. So the defense is not just about being in a war, it can also be defense against the flood, right? So if you're at the top of the hill, right, you are safer during times of flooding. Yes, and when we speak about relief, you must remember that it is much easier to farm on a gentle slope compared to a steep slope, right? So under relief, also think about it. A gentle slope is much easier to plow on compared to a steep slope, okay? And it's also cheaper to construct, right? On a gentle slope compared to a steep slope. Okay, now let's quickly do a question paper from 2022, right? You can see that it says May, June 2022. We're not doing the whole thing, we're just doing a few questions, right? It's multiple choice. Let's read. The first step is to read the instruction, right? It says the various options are provided as possible answers to the following questions. Choose the answer and write only the letter. At metric level now, you should learn to follow instructions, right? We're writing only the letter and they gave you an example there, 1.1.9. D. So don't be stubborn and start writing the term or the concept instead of the letter, right? You write the question number and the letter only, right? 1.1.1 says the actual ground that is occupied by a farm, the actual land, right? Or the actual ground, okay? Is it A, location? So is it A, situation? Is it B, location? Is it C, the site? Or D, the space? When did we even speak about D, the space? Let's cancel some of these options, right? Let's cancel some of them. We know that we are not referring to the location. B is not the one. D, space, cancel that one. So the answer is between these two. We know it's between site and situation. How do we define situation? Situation is the location of the settlement site in relation to the surrounding area. And we know that site is the exact land or the physical land, right? So you can hear that the correct answer has to be site, the exact land. But this question says the actual ground is the same thing, right? Situation is site in relation to the surrounding area. But site is the exact land, the physical ground, right? The actual ground, the actual land on which the settlement is found. So the answer there is C. You can see that all these two, you can see you can strike off the two are completely unrelated, okay? And then site and situation, you can, by knowing the definitions, it's easier to choose the correct answer. 1.1.2, the choice of site for the location of a farm, right? You are a farmer now, you have to choose the exact land in which you're going to have your farm. Is going to be influenced by A, the population size, B, topography, the shape of the land, topography, think about it. C, finance. D, market, right? D, market, okay? Now, the site is the physical land, right? The site is the physical land. From these three, which one speaks about the physical land? Is it population site? No. Is it finance? No. Is it market? No. But which one refers specifically to land, to topography, to relief? It's B, right? The topography, which is the shape of the land, which is the shape of the land. Remember, site is the actual ground, actual land, right? So obviously it will be influenced by the topography, the shape of the land, which is option B, right? 1.1.3. The situation of a farm is influenced by, you have your farm now, right? 1.1.2, we checked the topography, right? We see that, okay, we have fertile land. Sorry, we have a gentle slope now. You have your farm already, right? Remember now, situation is the location of the site in relation to the surrounding area. Now, they are saying that the situation of a farm is influenced by A, soil fertility. Let's know, right? Soil fertility will determine the site because you will want your crops to be there on the actual land. So A out. Water sources. Water sources is a site factor. It is a site factor. You're going to have it right there close to the water source. Distance from the to market and steepness of the land. Let's topography. We're done with that, right? So let's remove these two. Let's remove these two. You have your farm, then here's your farm. Okay, so the situation, the surrounding area, obviously now you need people. After you've grown your crops, you need a market to sell to, right? The surrounding area needs to have a market, right? There must be people to sell to. So the answer has to be C, distance to market. Okay, so with these kind of questions, they are application type questions. Okay, they are application questions. We are not asking you like define list. No, we're not playing the game, right? You need to apply. If you know all your site factors, right? You remember water, soil, these were site factors. Now we want a situation, right? It's very easy to pick water sources if you don't know that water is under site. Okay, now that we have covered some of the things, right, it's very important to know how to integrate your theory into map work, right? So there's a small map there, here's a small grid, right? On the side you can see that I'm going to look at rural versus urban areas. I know we haven't covered urban areas, but I think we all know what an urban area looks like. We all know what a rural area looks like, right? A rural area has one dominant activity, economic activity, which is primary activities, right? In rural areas, we have our triple FMH. We have farming, forestry, fishing, mining, and hunting, right? Those are all primary activities. And on the map, you are going to see them as green. They are going to look green. You can see here, there's orchards and vineyards. There's some cultivate. Let me put my pointer there. These are orchards and vineyards almost all over here. We also have cultivated land, right? So this is all farming, 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 right? So these are obviously our rural areas, right? They are our rural. You can see all these green spaces, rural. So on your map, green, where you see green, just know that there's primary activities there, right? There's agriculture, there is farming, right? Rural areas. Now, your urban areas, you can see the way it says CS. I don't know if I'm reading it proper, right? You can see CS here. There's a built-up area here, right? he has a built-up area. So this one has to be our urban area. Our urban area. Our urban area will be black, right? It will be what? Black. This black shows us our secondary activities there, right? There's industries here, there's manufacturing, okay? There is manufacturing, okay? So you will see black, you know that that's an urban area. An urban area does not only have secondary activities, there's also tertiary activities, right? Also have quaternary activities. So it is multifunctional. It doesn't have one function like rural areas. Rural areas just have primary activities. They are unifunctional. Urban areas also have tertiary activities. Our tertiary activities are going to be gray on the map, right? So these are some of the, you can see here, this is all green, right? Tertiary activities refer to services, right? Our secondary is all about manufacturing. You can see here there's industries, there's factories all over there. And then our tertiary activities are all about service provision. Like we have police station, you can see there, right? We have police station, there's the P there. No, there's a PS, right? And then a P, correct me if I'm wrong, P is for post office, okay? We have holiday resorts, we have schools, recreations, hospitals, all these provide a service. They are tertiary and they are gray. You can see this gray area here, right? So where you see a lot of black dots like this one and gray area, those are urban areas, right? They are urban. Okay, these big black dots, there's in this black area here, there's industries there, there's manufacturing, right? And then where it's gray here, you'll find a lot of tertiary activities, a lot of service provision. Okay, so this part here, demarcated in red, this is my urban area, right? All around here, you see it's green. That's your rural area, right? You can see it's all primary activities there, right? And you will see them with green, right? You will see green there on the map. Okay, now that we know our rural areas and our urban areas, right? We know that rural areas are unifunctional, right? Primary activities are dominant there, and in our rural areas are multifunctional, right? There's secondary and tertiary activities, right? Even quaternary activities. We now need to know the size and complexity of these settlements, right? From the smallest settlement until the largest settlement. Okay, our smallest settlement is known as a farmstead, an isolated farmstead, right? Followed by a hamlet and a village, which means hamlet is larger than a farmstead, right? A village is larger than a hamlet and a farmstead. Okay, now all these three here, our farmstead, hamlet, and village, they are rural areas. You can see that we have an image there of a rural area. Okay, and then the last five are obviously our urban areas. We have a town, we have a city, we have a metropolis, we have a conurbation, and a megalopolis. A megalopolis is the largest settlement. Okay, they are in order from the smallest to the largest, which means the smallest urban area is a town. Okay, you can see that we have a nice image there of our urban area with tall buildings, hardly any vegetation there. Okay, now these are the things you need to know. You need to know the names of these settlements. We know them now. Isolated farmstead is the smallest one, with a hamlet, a village, a town, a city, a metropolis, a conurbation, and a megalopolis. Now we need to know how to define them, right? This one, number three, which one is smaller, which one is larger? We know that, right? You must know them in this order. Which one is rural, which one is urban? Which we know the first three are rural settlements, and then the last five are the urban settlements. Okay, now let's define them. Okay, the first one, isolated farmstead. This one refers to a single farm which has a main building and can have outbuildings for laborers and sheds, right? So this one cannot be an isolated farm. So you can see we have a house here, we have a house here, we have a house, right? With a what you call, with a farmstead, it needs to be isolated, right? You can have some buildings here on the outside, but as long as it's just one isolated farm there, the net one is in farmstead. Okay, and then a hamlet now is a small group of farms. You can see this is a farmstead number one, this is farmstead number two, farmstead number three, farmstead number four, number five, number six. So this image here is actually showing us a hamlet, right? A hamlet, a group of small farmsteads, right? We said a farmstead is a single farm, right? Which has a main building and can also have some outbuildings like this one here. Maybe there's a main building here and then there's some outbuildings for laborers and even some sheds, okay? But since here it's a group of farmsteads, we call it a hamlet, right? That's a hamlet, a small group of hamlets. Sorry, a small group of farmsteads. Okay, and then a village is a settlement that can have both rural and urban function. Right? It can be farming, and then it can also be shops. Obviously, you need to sell. Right? Crops need to be sold. There's some goods that people need. Okay, so with a village, it can have both rural and urban functions. That's a village. Okay, so the smallest one, it refers to a single farm which has a main building. It can have what? Outbuildings such as a shed, right? A hamlet is a small group of farmsteads. And then a village, right, is a settlement that has both rural and urban functions. Right? It has farms, it also has some shops around. Okay? Those are our rural areas. That's how you define them. And then for our urban area, the first one is a town, right? And a town is an urban area that does not offer an extensive range of urban functions, right? It occupies a small geographical area, right? It does not have a wide range of urban functions, although it has them, okay? But it's not a wide range. It occupies a small geographical area, right? A good example is Ladysmith, right? Ladysmith, that urban area is not so big, right? It occupies a small geographical area, right? It doesn't offer a lot of urban functions, right? It has a small range of urban functions. And then a city, right? This one is a very large urban center, right? That offers a wide variety of services, including specialized functions such as financial services, okay? Such as financial what? Services. So a town does not offer an extensive range of services, okay? It covers a small geographical area, even though it's an urban area. And then a city now is a very large urban center, right? Very large what? Urban center that offers a wide variety of services. And then a metropolis. This one refers to a single city that is surrounded by many independent towns. A single city that is surrounded by many independent what? Towns. Okay, so a good example of a metropolis would be Johannesburg, right? It would be what? Johannesburg, a single city that is surrounded by many independent towns, right? It's surrounded by towns like Bopenoni, right? But Johannesburg is the powerhouse, an economic powerhouse of South Africa, okay? We also have a conurbation. This one's forms from a combination of many towns and cities that merge with each other. Example, Johannesburg, Midrand, and Pretoria, right? They form a conurbation, right? It forms from a combination of many towns and cities that merge with each other, right? That's a conurbation, right? Example, Johannesburg, Midrand, and what? Pretoria. Then our largest city, right? Sorry, our largest settlement, sorry, the megalopolis. This is a gigantic urban area that forms when many conurbations join, right? When many what? Conurbations join. Example, when we have one overseas of Boston, New York, and Washington, right? Those are gigantic, very big urban areas that um, join together, right? That form many conurbations, right? That's a megalopolis, the largest urban area. Okay. Okay, now let's have a look at what's happening on this AI generated image, right? Decoding human settlements, right? I have my rural area on this side versus my urban area on the other side, okay? We won't dive deeper into the urban area because remember our topic is rural settlement. When you go to urban areas, we'll also dive into this side a lot, but you can just see the difference, right? I wrote here our rural areas are unifunctional, right? They focus more on primary activities of farming, fishing, forestry, mining, and hunting, okay? mining and hunting. Our urban area, you can see it says it is multifunctional, right? Multifunctional, why? Because in our urban areas, there's secondary activities, there's tertiary activities, right? There's quaternary. It speaks about dispersed patterns here. Dispersed means you can see that in rural areas, houses are far apart. This is a dispersed settlement. They are far apart. But in rural areas, we can also have a nucleated settlement, right? They can also be close together in rural areas. So, but most of the time they are dispersed, they are spread out, they are far apart, okay? But in urban areas, they are always nucleated, right? They are always clustered. The buildings are always close together, right? Yes. So rural areas are dispersed, but they can also be nucleated. They can be clustered also. Urban areas, as you can see, they are always nucleated. Okay, they are always nucleated. Remember what I just spoke about, right? I spoke about dispersed settlements and nucleated settlements. Right now, I'm going to settlement patterns, right? We have different patterns, right? We have a dispersed settlement, we have a nucleated settlement, okay? A dispersed, remember I said the houses are far apart, right? The settlements, right? They are far apart, they are isolated. But with the nucleated settlement, can you see how these houses are clustered, right? The settlement is clustered, they are closer together. They are nucleated. Look at this image, right? You can see this little drawing here, this little sketch is representing this image here, right? Now this one here is representing this little image here, right? The houses are far apart. Here they are clustered. Clustered means they are nucleated. Dispersed means they are far apart. And now there's also a topographic map now to represent the same information, because everything you learn about must be integrated into map work, right? I hope this video will make it easier, because most of the time um, there's limited time, right, at school. So at least now you also have videos to support your learning. Okay, now as you can see from these topographical maps, the settlement, you can see it is a dot, right? You can see my pointer and right. There's a black dot here representing my buildings. There's another one here now. See, they are far apart, right? I know at this particular point here they are a bit clustered, right? But if you were to compare this to what's happening on this side, right? This topographical map here is showing a nucleated settlement. These black dots are representing my settlements, right? My buildings are there, right? They are close together on this side, which means they are nucleated, okay? But being nucleated has advantages, right? If you are closer together, right, there's many hands to help. There's many what? Hands to help. It's a safety advantage, because if something happens to you, there's people close by which can assist you in that rural area, right? In that rural what area? Remember, today I'm just focusing on rural areas, right? Yes, if it's nucleated, there's a lot of people close by. If you scream for help, people will be there quicker. There'll be less people stealing livestock. There's more help available, right? There's a safety advantage if you are nucleated, okay? You can share expenses. You can share what? Expenses, okay? Let's say there's a new machinery in which you guys want to buy. Like, everyone can contribute. See, expenses can be shared, right? When you want to buy fertilizers or anything, those expenses can be shared, right? Even machinery can be shared, right? Everyone can use maybe one tractor, right? We don't all have to have our own tractors, right? Remember, we're all in the same area, right? So we can share machinery, okay? um with our dispersed settlement also has a lot of advantages, right? Number one, you can have a large single farm. Look at what's happening here, right? There's enough space to have your own single farm here, right? Very large one. You can see here, people have large farms, right? There's more space, okay? You can manage your farm yourself, right? You don't need inputs from anyone, right? You can manage it yourself, okay? There's independent decisions, okay? Because it's your farm, right? You're not nucleated, you are spaced out. This person here can have his own large farm here, Okay, you can live on farm. There is no traveling. Okay, because if you are here on the nucleated one, you find that your house is here in the center. You have to travel towards your farm. But in a dispersed settlement, you find your farm is nearby, right? There is no traveling to go to your farm, right? Mechanization is also easier. What do I mean by mechanization? Okay, this means that the settlement, the farm will be able to grow much easier. Okay, now these are disadvantages of being nucleated, right? Of being clustered. Number one, there's loose patches of land, right? The land is fragmented. You'll find that one piece of your land is somewhere here, another one is somewhere there, because there's limited space, right? So there's loose patches of land. The land is fragmented, right? Foreman manages no independent decisions, right? Remember, you're not alone here, right? Whatever you do, you have to consult other people to make decisions, right? Yes, there's a lot of people who manage what's happening there, right? Lives in village, lots of traveling. Remember what I spoke about now. Your farm is somewhere there, and you are right in the center. You have to travel a long distance to get to your farm, right? And it's very hard to to expand, right? To make it bigger. So mechanization is difficult. Okay, it is difficult in your nucleated settlements, right? And also in nucleated settlements, there is less profits. There is less what? Profits. There is more people there. Your farms are much smaller, right? If you are sharing a farm with someone, obviously you'll have to share the profits as well, right? So there's less profits in our nucleated settlements, but in our dispersed settlements, you will see that there is going to be more profits, right? There's going to be more profits, right? That's one of the advantages which was not added. For dispersed settlements, there is more profit, right? Remember, you have a large piece of land, right? Large piece of land. There will be less competition also. These settlements are very far apart. Okay, so there's more profits here. Here is less profits. In dispersed settlement, you can also how can I put this? You can also experiment with new machinery here, dispersed settlement. Right? Remember, you are all alone there. Okay, you can use machinery anytime, even if it's very noisy. It's okay because you are alone. It's dispersed, right? You can experiment with new machinery and technology. Okay, new machinery and what technology you can use modern methods and equipment. You can experiment with all of that, right? There's also a lot of privacy. Remember, you are all alone here, right? Your neighbor is somewhere there, right? There's a lot of privacy for you. But you can see in nucleated settlements now, there's a lack of privacy. Lack of what? Privacy. In dispersed settlements, right? Remember, you are alone, which means you're going to cover all the expenses alone. So that's a disadvantage, right? But in nucleated, remember, there's a lot of people, you can share expenses. If you choose to buy new machinery, right? Everyone can share, right? Everyone can everyone can contribute. But with dispersed settlements, you are alone, so you cover all expenses, right? You say limited help when needed, right? Limited what? Help when needed. Now, this is true because imagine if someone was to attack you here in your farm, right? Your neighbors are far away. They won't even know that someone happened. So they won't even know that something happened to you, right? Until weeks go by, right? So there's limited help, right? There's a lack of social life when you're in a dispersed settlement, right? It says mechanization is expensive. If you want to expand, it's going to be very expensive because remember, you are all alone. You are not sharing expenses with anyone. You buy everything for yourself, okay? You buy everything for yourself. Okay, now here's our map. Remember map integration, right? We are going to look at our nucleated settlements versus our dispersed settlements. Look at this part here. You can see that these buildings are clustered closer together, right? So it's a nucleated settlement pattern. Dense grouping of farmsteads, right? Remember our farmstead is what? Our smallest rural area. You can see this is a rural area. There's farming, there's orchards and vineyards here, right? And you can see on this side of cultivation, houses are close together, close to each other. You can see that on your topographic map now. You can see the cluster there. It is nucleated. Okay. Now We know our advantages of nucleated, right? There's more people close by, right? Neighbors are nearby. You can share ideas. So that if you have a new idea, you share it with everyone. Sharing of equipment, right? Services can be easily supplied to the whole community because everyone is close together, okay? But it also has disadvantages. No independent decisions on the land use. Remember, now you have to consult everyone before you use the land, right? You cannot use farming machinery, right, freely, okay? Communities must share in the profits. You see, now there's a lot of people sharing in the profit. That's why we're telling you that nucleated settlements have smaller profits, whereas our dispersed settlements have larger profits. Look at these black dots here, right? There's one here, one here. These ones are dispersed. There's one on this side, one on this side. You can see my arrows are pointing. These settlements are far from each other. They are dispersed, loose grouping of settlements. They are isolated. Houses are far from each other. Okay, those ones are going to have some advantages and disadvantages. Remember, we are saying it is an economic advantage because our dispersed settlements have larger profits. Like you're not sharing with anyone. Landowner has a large tract of land. Okay, this person here, maybe this entire piece of land belongs to him. This one here, maybe this entire part belongs to him, right? It's a large piece of land. These ones are nucleated. They are sharing this land. You see that? You decide independently on land use, right? Our dispersed settlements, you decide independently. You don't consult anyone. You are alone there, right? You can maximize profits if it's like that, okay? But remember, there are disadvantages. There's a threat of crime. There are farm killings, right? There are farm killings there. Someone can come take your livestock and then kill you. People will only know a week later or weeks later that something actually happened to you, right? There's boredom because you have no neighbors, you're bored. There's a lack of social life, right? You cannot share ideas if there's a problem, right? You deal with everything yourself, right? It is not easy to provide basic services due to isolation, right? Not easy to provide basic services. Think now you're a government. There's one person here, one person there. Sorry, one farm here, one farm there. Obviously, you will choose to provide services here where there's a cluster of people, right? Now, this one is not a settlement pattern, right? This slide was supposed to be somewhere up there, but it's fine. This one is talking about, remember one of those side factors which was defense. You can see there's people on top of a mountain here, right? For defense reasons, okay? You can be defended against floods or maybe during times of war, maybe back then when tribes used to fight, right? It was safer to be on top of a mountain. Now on your map, remember we must integrate on the map. You can see here the contours are close together all around this hill or this mountain. You can see contours are close together, which means a steep slope on this side. Steep slope, and this is the top of a mountain. You can see there's a cluster of buildings there, right? The cluster there at the top, this part here. Can you see how it's shown on your topographic map? There's contour lines close together all around, indicating these steep slopes, right? Now, remember, not all of these factors are available in a site, right? Not all, right? Some of them can apply. These are some of the factors we spoke about, right? Water was one of them. We spoke about fertile land, arable land, right, for cultivation, fertile soil, building materials. We spoke about wood, defense, the one I just showed you, and a dry point. We're going to dive deeper into that one soon, right? Now, for this one, the settlement, right, is here. Why? Because there's a source of water. You can see here there's a perennial water there, right? So if people they put the farm here so it can be closer to a water source, right? Another reason here is the arable land. How do you know that the land can be used for cultivation? You can see here there's cultivated land. So obviously that's why they chose to put the farm here. You can see cultivated land, these two green lines, green. Right, it shows that the land is arable, right? It can be used for cultivation. Hence, you see cultivated land all over, right? Now, another reason can be defense. Remember the previous slide, on top of a mountain, it is there for defense reasons. You are away from floods, right? If there's a battle with another tribe, safe at the top of a mountain, right? So it can be for defense as well. That's another factor which you can see from your topographical map, right? Now, remember we spoke about water being a side factor, right? But remember, if water is scarce, if the area is dry, it only makes sense for people to settle close to a water source if it's dry all over, right? If it is dry all over. Here you are seeing they are saying wet point settlement, choosing a site that is close to a water source because water is scarce. If there's no water, like here you can see we have a lot of non-perennial rivers. They are non-perennial, right? If the area is dry, you will choose to cycle next to a water source. Like you see this orange river here. You will choose to be closer to it because water is scarce. Now you need to be in an area close to water. And now it means at that particular point there is water. So it's a wet point settlement. That particular point has water, but everywhere else water is scarce. Water is scarce. You can see here there's settlements, these dots here. Buildings, right? Now, these buildings, it says the Uppington is a semi-desert, is a dry region, right? In dry areas, settlement will be found along a river or a wet point, right? Settlements are found along the Orange River, close to the water source. Close to what? The water source. So it's a wet point settlement. The key here is now in it, the key here is that a dry area will have a point where there's water. If we have a settlement close to it, it's a wet point settlement. You can see here there's settlement here all over, close to the water source because Uppington is a semi-desert, is a dry area. You can see we have a non-perennial river here, but we have a river here, we have an orange river. Then these people choose to settle closer to it. So this is a wet point settlement. On the other hand, right? On the other hand, if there's a lot of water in an area, right? Choosing a site on a higher ground, running away from flooding, right? If there's too much water now, water becomes a threat. Water becomes what? A threat. So people will choose to locate at a high ground. Right, you see contour lines close together, contour lines close together. Then at the top, there will be settlement, right? At that dry point, because water is now a threat. So people choose to locate where? At the dry point, right? So wet point, there is no water. Water is scarce. People settle where? Close to a water source, close to a wet point. Dry point, you can see here now there's a big dam there, right? Now water becomes a threat, it's too much. So people cycle on a high ground away from the water source, right? Away from the water source. Let's have a look at our aerial photography, right? Our orthophoto, right? It says the wet point settlement, choosing a site close to the water source because water is scarce. You can see here we have the Namib what desert near Uppington. This is a desert all over, right? It says the a wet site is chosen for water source along the banks of the Orange River. It's pointing here, right? You can see there's some buildings here close to the water source. You can see all over it's a desert. But here there's a water source, there's the Orange River. So obviously people will cycle closer to it, close to the water source. So it's a wet point because this part is wet, then settlement is there next to the wet point, right? Now wet site is chosen for water source along the banks of the Orange River. Okay, so you should see this even in our aerial photographs or auto photos. Here's my river there, then along it we have buildings, right? We have settlement close to the wet point. So it's a wet point what? Settlement. It can take other patterns or other shapes, right? Other shapes. Now we have these other ones. We have a planned rounded settlement, right? A planned what? Rounded settlement. We have crossroads. We have linear settlements, right? A planned or a rounded settlement. You can see that houses are what are grouped around a market square. Can be around a church, can be around a water source, a green village where there's just greenery, or it can be around a kraal of animals to protect them, like in Shaga 11, right? People were all circled around what a kraal to protect the livestock, right? You can see that this settlement is also taking a round shape, right? A round what shape. You can find that maybe in the center there's a church, maybe there's even a school, right? Or maybe a market square. Sometimes there's even a water source in the center, right? If it takes a round shape, remember it's a round circle, right? It's around a central point, right? Look at how it looks here on this drawing here. Okay, we have crossroad settlements, but crossroad settlements, right? This is where roads cross, right? It can be in three ways. What they are showing us here, it looks like more so it's a star shape, right? They are showing us a star shape, right? There's also a cross-shaped settlement, right? In crossroads, we also have a cross-shaped one. Let me draw it here on the side. Let me draw it here on the side. If roads are crossing like this, you can see there, and then we have settlements along these roads. Can you see what's happening? Those red dots, and they're not so clear, but you can see that these roads are crossing, right? This is cross-shaped settlement. It's part of our crossroads, okay? Crossroads. And then we also have this one here. You can see it's forming a T. This is a T-shaped settlement. You'll find settlements along these roads, right? Here's my dots there for settlement. This one is a T-shaped one. And then we have a star-shaped one, right? So there's three types of crossroads. The one that's shown here is a star-shaped, right? We have a T-shaped, we have a cross-shaped one. And then linear, you can see that it's along a road, can also be along a river, right? Here's the road here, and then along it we have what? We have settlement, right? It's along a line, right? It's a linear settlement. Okay, now let's do a short activity on this topographic map to see what we remember, right? Firstly, when you're given a diagram, you need to analyze what's happening, right? We have a key. This blue part is a water source. So there's settlement around a water source, around a wet point, okay? And there's a lot of buildings there, so it's nucleated, right? And then, okay, this black dots are farmsteads, okay? Then this red part here represents our road. So we have settlement here along the road. So it's linear, it's along a line, right? And then these lines here, this shape here is our farm boundary, right? You can see that this person here has this entire farm to himself. This one here, the entire farm to himself. Even here, this farmstead here, the entire farm to itself. But at D, you can see these people here are sharing this farm. You see that nucleated, they are sharing profits, they are sharing the land. Okay, now let's go over the question. What is the pattern of A and D? At A, you can see the pattern is alone there. So, is it nucleated? Is it dispersed? The pattern is dispersed. D, you can see now these farmsteads, right, are all clustered here, so it is nucleated. Let's see if our answer is correct. Yes, D is nucleated, but A is dispersed. They are far from each other. These ones are clustered. Okay, number 2, what is the shape of settlement B and D? Here's settlement B, here's settlement D. You can see that this shape here is along a line. So it has to be linear. B has to be linear. D, can you see now it's circular. It has to be rounded. Let's check. Yes, you see that B along a line is linear. B is round. Okay. Number 6, explain the factor influencing the shape at B. Right, the shape at what? At B. You see at B there's a river and a mountain that restricts expansion, right? You can see on this side the contours are getting close to each other. This is the top of a hill. You can see this O here is the top of a hill. So B cannot B cannot expand in this direction because of the mountain, right? The mountain on this side is a hill on this side. And it cannot expand going downwards here because there's a river. So it can't expand, it is restricted. Okay? C. State and explain the climatic factor that is responsible for the location of settlement at C. Climatic what? Factor. Now look, there's a north point here. There is a north point. If you remember your topic on aspect, you know that in the southern hemisphere, the north-facing slopes are warmer, right? That's climatic factor. Remember, aspect is under our climate and weather, right? How do we know it's a north-facing slope? We can see this is a north pole, right? It's a north what? Pole. This is the top of a hill. Okay, we have 760 meters here, we have 740. So on this side, the contour lines, contour heights are decreasing going northwards. That's how you know this side of the slope is a north facing. On this side of the slope, the contour lines, the heights are decreasing southwards, which means this side of the slope is facing what? South, and it is cold. But on this side, the contour heights are decreasing going northwards, which means that this side is facing north. It's not facing. In the southern hemisphere, north-facing slopes are warmer, right? Okay, let's look at some of the settlement shapes, right, from a topographical map, right? With the first one, you can see that we have a linear shape. Linear means it's along a line, right? L for line. It's a linear shape. Houses form a line shape in a line along the river. Mountain can be a road, right? In this case, you can see that the village is right along what? The river bank, right? What? Along the river bank. We also have a road there, right? It can be a river bank, can be a mountain, can be a road, right? It can be a mountain because if there's a steep slope on this side, okay, in this case we don't have it, right? But if there was a steep slope, it would limit expansion, right, towards the slope. So the settlement will take a linear shape. It will be along a line, right? In this case, we have a river right there. We also have a road, right? It's linear. It's along a line. Then a round shape, right? Houses are situated around a dam, around a church. Sometimes it can be around a green area, or back then it was around a kraal, right? But in this case, you can see that the village is on top of a mountain, right? You can see there's a steep slope on every side of this mountain, and then at the top it takes a round shape, right? It's an oval shape. Okay, this is a round village or a round shape, right? It's a round something. In this case, it's just on top of a hill, right? It's forming an oval shape or a round shape. Okay, and then the last one, our star shape settlement, right? Houses are situated along transport routes, right? This is part of our crossroads, okay, where transport links or transport routes meet. Okay, you can see it forms a star, right? A village is star shaped. It extends along transport what routes, right? You can see the shape there is a star. It is a star shape. Okay, take a look at this topographical map, right, to see the land use in rural settlements, right? Land use in rural areas includes farming, forestry, and conservation. Farming, but farming is practiced at different levels, right? We have subsistence farming, right? Subsistence farming is when the farmer mainly grows crops to meet his family's needs, right? He may also keep livestock for milk and meat. The subsistence farming, S for small scale. This is farming at a small scale using traditional farming methods. Okay, and then we have commercial farming, right? Commercial farming is farming on a large scale, right? This one is for a profit, right? It is capital intensive, right? They generally farm one main crop, right? They use modern technology, and this farming can be intensive, right? Intensive means every piece of land is used. As you can see here on this topographic map, look at this top half here. Every piece of this land is used for farming, right? When it's like that, it means it is intensive farming. Okay, it is intensive. It is commercial also because it is done at a large scale, right? It is done for a profit, right? Yes, modern technology or modern machinery is used there. Okay, remember subsistence farming, this one is for small scale. It is farming at a small scale to meet the needs of the farmer, right? The needs of his family, right? So the small scale, it is not for a profit. Okay. Now, if you look at a map like this or a topographical map, There's ways in which you can tell which one is commercial, which one is subsistence. Commercial farming, remember, it's on a large scale. You can see this top half here, this top half here, right? This entire part is cultivated, right? It's at a large scale, and every piece of land is being used, right? So it is intensive, right? Intensive cultivation. Every piece is used, right? Extensive is when it occurs over a large tract of land like this one. You can see it's a large tract of land, right? But uh, but um, but not every piece of the land is used, because maybe the area may be dry or something like that. Okay, but in this map here, we're just showing you intensive cultivation. You can see here it's intense. Every piece of land is being used, and it's commercial because it's on a large scale for a profit, right? Now these are some of the ways in which you can tell from a topographic map if there's commercial farming and whether it's intensive or not. First of all, the farms have names, right? They have what? Names. If you go to these farms, each one of them, you can see here as I'm pointing with my pointer, right? They have names. These farms have names. You will see names on each farm. Okay, that's how you know that it is commercial, right? It's on a large scale. They also have boundaries. I'm sure you can see. Look at my pointer here. There's these black lines here, right? There are these black lines. They are showing boundaries. Look at this one here, right? I'm pointing. Look at my pointing stick. Okay, they have boundaries, right? And a large scale, there's boundaries, they have farm names, right? There's water storage dam. You can see there's a dam here. There's a dam here also, right? Yes, the farmers have water storage dams, right? They have dams to store water. Okay, because remember they need a lot of water because they are farming at a large scale. If you look down here, you can see I'm not seeing any dam here, right? Because there's mostly subsistence farming. But with commercial farming, they have dams also for storing water, right? It is over a large, extensive area, right? Look at this entire area is cultivated, okay? Demarcation of settlement and farm. That's what I spoke about. You see, they have boundaries. They are demarcated, right? Everyone knows this is my plot. This is my plot, right? Yes. There's farm estates, okay? There's farm what? Estates. This map is not so clear, but you'll find estates all over around them, okay? And then we have subsistence farming. This one is at a small scale. If you look at this, look at my pointing stick here. Look at this. There's a small little farm here. There's a small little farm here also. Small farm, small farm. So you see, it's farming at a small scale, right? There's no water storage dams. I'm not seeing any dams here to store water because they don't have big farms, okay? There's no demarcation of farm. You see, there's just a farm here, there's a farm here. They don't have these black lines. See, these black lines used to demarcate or boundary the farms, right? Here, under subsistence farming, there's no demarcations of farms, right? Yes, a person just has a farm here, another one has a farm there. There's no boundary around it, okay? And it's on a small scale, right? It is to meet the needs of the farmer, right? With our small scale farmers, right? Remember I told you they usually keep some livestock for milk and meat, but obviously on the map we won't be showing you livestock, meat and milk, right? But you should just know that subsistence farming here, they usually keep some livestock, right? Okay, let's do yet another past paper activity, right? This is May, June 2024, right? Let's read the instructions, okay? Refer to the sketch below on the pattern and shape of rural settlements. Write only the answer next to the question, right? Example 1.1.8 circuit, right? Only the answer. Okay, 1.1.1 says the letter, so the settlement pattern at A. Let's look at A. Here's A, right? What's the settlement pattern at A? You can see that there's just one dot there, right? And you know these dots mean what? Our farmsteads, okay? Our farmstead. You can see it is isolated, right? Or you can also see that it is far away from other farmsteads. So it is isolated, or you can say it is dispersed, right? It is isolated, or you can say it is dispersed, okay? The settlement pattern at B, right? Let's look at B. Is B dispersed or nucleated? B is nucleated. See, there's a cluster of farmsteads there, right? There's a cluster, so it is nucleated. Okay? Settlement A or B is likely to generate a profit. Here's A, here's B. Remember what I told you about nucleated? There's a lot of farmsteads there. They are nucleated, so these farmers are going to share in the profit. So obviously, if we are sharing, you're going to have less profit. But this one here is independent. So all the profits will go to this person. So A is the one that has what? More profit, right? A has more profit. Let's look. 1.1.1, yes, A is dispersed. 1.1.2, yes, we said B is nucleated, right? So we are on the right track. Let's look at 1.1.3. Which one can generate more profits? It is A, the dispersed settlement, right? Generates more what? Profit. Okay. 1.1.4. The river caused the settlement at sea to have a shape. A what shape? You can see it's along a river now, right? What type of shape is it? You can see it's along a line. Remember, a river is a line feature. So obviously the settlement is going to be linear. Here's 1.1.4. It's a linear settlement, right? It's a linear settlement. Like the shape there is a linear. Okay? Linear. The shape of the settlement at F. Let's look, where's F? Where's F? Oh, there's F here. F is right there. You can see it. This is where these roads are meeting, right? It's a type of crossroad, right? You can see it's forming a T. Let me draw there so you can see it properly, okay? You can see, yes, the road, it intersects here with another one. You can see the shape there. It forms a T shape. So this settlement shape has to be T shape, right? You can see 1.1.5 is a T shape, okay? 1.1.6. D is located on a high ground due to a threat of flooding. This is called A. Remember, they are saying a threat of flooding, which means there's too much water. Water is now a threat. Water is now a threat. And now they are saying that D is at a higher ground, right? To be away from the water. So it means that D is in a dry point, right? Away from the water. So D has to be a dry point settlement. A dry point settlement, right? It is located on a high ground, right? Due to flooding, right? And water being a threat, okay? So obviously D went to a place where it is dry, at a dry point settlement, okay? 1.1.7, E is close to water supply. Where is E? And see, now it's close to water. It's close to a wet point. So it's a wet point what? Settlement. It's a wet point settlement, okay? Here's another past paper activity. It's a prelim. I think it's Limpopo province. Yes, 2024. Refer to the source material. Choose the correct word from the given or from those given in brackets. Write only the words next to the question number. Example 1.1.9 site. Right. Let's look at what's happening here. Right on our source material. They are showing us that this symbol here is for the road. Here's our. You see, there's a road here. You see, if you don't follow a symbol, you might think it's a river. But now, because there's a key, there is a legend, we know that this is our road, right? This represents our cultivated land. You can see here, land is cultivated here, 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 right? And then farm boundary. This line is for our farm boundary. This is a boundary, farm boundary, farm boundary. Can you see that I'm pointing there with my pointing stick, okay? And then this one is obviously a river. They labeled it here. It's a river. Okay. From the looks of things, B, there's a lot of settlements, a lot of farmsteads. So B has to be nucleated. They are clustered. A is isolated. It is dispersed. Then this is obviously a rural area, right? It is a rural area. Look at this. We have houses along the road. So there's a linear shape, right? Linear shape. Here we have a dispersed pattern, nucleated pattern. You see, we can already see some of the things, right? Yes, some of the things are already making sense. Now let's go here. 1.1.1. Identify the type of settlement in the figure. Is it rural or urban? This is obviously a rural area. You can see it is unifunctional, right? Primary activities are dominant there. There's cultivation, there's farming, right? Farm boundary, right? There's farming. We know that farming occurs where in our rural area because it is unifunctional. Okay, let's see. Yes, our answer is rural. 1.1.2. These settlements are associated with primary or tertiary. Remember, primary activities, extraction of our raw materials, right? Through fishing, farming, forestry, mining, and hunting. Now, tertiary is the provision of services. We know that is mostly in our our urban areas, right? So the answer has to be primary because it's a rural area. You see that? Answer is primary. Okay? Answer is primary. The physical factor that contributes to the choice of site. Choice of what? Site of this settlement, right? If you still remember um, our factors influencing site, right? Water was one of them, right? We had water being one of those sites, a very important site factor, right? We said where water is scarce, there's going to be a nucleation, right, of settlements because they want an area where there is some water. But where water is too much, there's going to be dispersed settlement because water will be everywhere, right? So here the answer has to be availability of water, right? That's a site factor. 1.1.4. Cultivation at A, here's A, is more likely to be small scale or large scale. More likely to be small scale or what? Large scale. Cultivation at A. Here's A right there, right? Here's A. You can see that we have it's in between a mountain, right? There's a small space here, okay, and it's a rural area. Okay, so most of the time you'll find small scale farming, right? You'll find subsistence farming, farming for your own needs, right? To gain a profit, right? So it is most likely to be small scale. Settlement A may be ranked, where is A? Low or higher than settlement B on the settlement hierarchy. On the settlement what? Hierarchy. Remember our settlement hierarchy? We had the smallest settlement being an isolated farmstead, right? Followed by a hamlet, a grouping, right, of small farmsteads, small grouping of farmsteads. You can see this one is likely a hamlet, right? So which one is lower? A has to be lower, right? A has to be lower because you can see low A is a farmstead. It's an isolated farmstead, right? Yes, here's 1.9.5. It is lower, right, in the settlement hierarchy. 1.1.6, the settlement shape at C. Where is C? C, you can see it's along a road, right? Along a line feature. So the settlement shape has to be linear. You can see it is linear. Here's our answer here. 1.1.7, the shape of settlement C is determined by access to what? You can see here there is a road, right? So is it what I told you? If you don't look at your key, you might think this is a river, but our river is here on the side. This is representing our road, right? So this settlement here was influenced by transport, right? And see, where is it? It has to be transport, not water. Water is right here on the side, but there's a road here. It's even written here, it's even labeled road, right? So obviously settlement C is influenced by transport. Let's see. Yes, it is transport. 1.1.8. Pollution or soil erosion is more likely to affect the farmer in settlement C. Where is C? Right? Soil erosion has to be the answer. You can see here we have steep slopes, right? And you can see it's raining. We know water is an agent of erosion. So it can wash away the fertile soil here. Right? So these farmers here see are most likely going to be affected by soil erosion. Right? Can you see how I analyze the diagram? There's a steep slope here. It's raining. Water is an agent of erosion. It will wash away the fertile top soil, right? So the answer there has to be soil erosion. Let's try this one here. There's an activity here referred to the topographical map extract, right? 2821 AC, 2821 CA, and answer the questions that follow, right? Settlement pattern at A Is it dispersed or nucleated? You can see it's one dot, one building there, one farmstead there, right? So the settlement pattern 8A has to be dispersed. It has to be dispersed, right? One physical factor, right? Which influence the site of this settlement, right? The physical factor there of this settlement, maybe it was fertile soil, right? You can see there's cultivation all over here, right? Fertile soil can be access to water. There's a river here, right? Okay. Number 3, state 2 disadvantages of this settlement pattern. 2 disadvantages of being isolated. Remember, there's no social life, right? Yes, you can't interact with your neighbors, right? You can't share farming ideas and tips with anyone because they are far away, right? You can be targeted by criminals, right? There's more farm killings when you are isolated, right? There's a lot of them. Choose the correct answer um, from those in the bracket. Settlement A is a wet point or a dry point. You can see settlement A is next to a water source, right? There's a river here, right? So settlement A has to be a wet point. It is next to a wet area, right? So it's a wet point settlement. Give one reason for your answer. It is located close to a river. Describe the shape of settlement B. Now look at the shape. It's along a river, and on this side we have a small road on this side. So it's along a line feature. So B has to be linear settlement. 2 factors influencing the shape. You can see there's a road, which is a line feature. We also have what you call this. We also have a river. We have a perennial river there, which is a line what feature. Okay, Matrix. Now let's look at rural settlement issues, right? Rural settlement what? Issues, right? If you go to your program of assessment, you will see that under this topic, you must know the concept of rural urban migration, right? You must understand push and pull factors. You must be able to define rural depopulation, right? You should look at the consequences of rural depopulation on people and the economy. If you look at strategies to address rural depopulation, you look at a case study that illustrates the effects of rural depopulation and strategies to address them, right? And then finally, we'll look at the social issues associated with rural settlement, right? We'll be able to define the challenges in implementation and success stories and impact on communities, right? That's why we are going to be talking about land reform, okay? We'll look at a resource which is water, right? And then lastly, we'll define and understand the 3 pillars of land reform, which is land tenure reform, land redistribution, and land restitution, okay? As I've outlined in the exam guideline, there's a topic of rural-urban migration, right? You know from grade 10, migration refers to the movement of people from one place to another. In this case, the place is from rural to urban, right? So when you define rural-urban migration, you define it as the movement of people from rural to urban areas, right? Don't say people moving to the city from a rural area. No. Put it like this: movement of people from rural areas to urban areas. Okay. As you can see here, with our rural area and people are moving to the city, right? Okay, they are walking, but okay, they'll obviously use transport. Okay. They are moving from rural to urban. If you look at this arrow, you can just simply ignore it, but it's showing something also. You can see at the front it is a very big pointer. You can see it's big here, showing that the population in urban areas are going to increase. But look at the arrow here at the back, showing us that in the rural areas, the population is going to decline, that there's going to be less people, there's going to be rural depopulation. Rural depopulation, which is the decrease in the number of people living where in rural areas, right? And then obviously in our urban areas, we're going to have urbanization there. Okay, now that we've defined rural urban migration, let's analyze what's happening on this image, right? You can see this is a rural area, obviously, and people are moving towards the urban area, right? So they are migrating, right? There's rural urban migration. You can see even my arrow there is pointing from a rural area towards an urban area, right? So the reasons why they move is because of push and pull factors, right? Push factors, remember, they are pushing you away. They are unfavorable conditions. They are centrifugal forces. Centrifugal forces are push factors, right? These are some of the push factors causing people to move away from rural areas, right? There's mechanization, right? If they buy one machinery in the farm, you can find 10 people losing their jobs, so they'll be forced to move to urban areas. There's low salaries, right? In rural areas, people work hard for long hours and receive a low pay, right? So they'll move away thinking that they'll get a better salary way in the urban area, right? Even natural disasters such as floods and droughts, right? Remember, a drought is a prolonged period of little to no rainfall, right? So obviously here, since farming is the main activity, if there's a drought, people will be forced to move away because they have less crop production, right? There is a lot of crime, there's a lot of farm killings in our rural areas, right? Especially in dispersed settlements, right? Where people can come to steal the livestock and kill the farm owners, right? So there's crime also in our rural areas. And you know that there's lack of job opportunities, right? There's a high rate of unemployment there, right? Yes, in our rural areas. These are some of the push factors, unfavorable conditions. There's more. Remember, there's poor access to education also, right? Children have to travel for long distances to access a school, right? There's also poor transport networks. You see the roads, right? They are gravel roads, okay? um there's a lot, there's sparse populations, right? You can find that in a village there's a few people, right? When it's like that, you see some businesses will close down. You see such things, right? There's poor service delivery, there's lack of electricity, running water and sewage services, right? Yeah, those are centrifugal, they are push factors, they are unfavorable conditions, okay? Okay, now in urban areas we have more pull factors, centripetal forces, right? We have better job opportunities, right? We know that it doesn't mean that there's there's jobs for everyone, right? But compared to rural areas, there's better job opportunities, there's better salaries compared to the rural area, there's better access to education, right? There's a variety of education institutions. There's primary schools, secondary and tertiary, and most importantly, they are more accessible, right? There's improved medical facilities, right? People are also attracted by the bright lights in the city, right? Bright lights. There's more, right? There's availability of doctors and access to hospitals, right? Access to sporting facilities and greater access to entertainment facilities. Whereas in rural areas there's less entertainment facilities, but in urban areas we know there's more entertainment facilities. So there's an improved quality of life, is better standards of living, right? But remember, there are consequences. When people move away from the rural area to the urban area, it means there's going to be less people here in our rural area, right? So there's consequences of rural urban migration, because it leads to what we call rural depopulation. The number of people in rural areas is going to decrease. The decrease in the number of people in rural areas, rural depopulation, right? So these are some of the consequences. Number one, we have empty houses. Empty what? Houses, right? Yes. Um, the rural area can become abandoned, right? When it's abandoned, it forms what we call a ghost town, right? When buildings and farms are abandoned, yes, right, they form what we call ghost towns, right? Because there's less people, it leads to more crime, right? More farm murders. Remember, just imagine your grandfather is alone there and he's taking care of a lot of livestock, right? Criminals can come there, they can kill your grandfather, right, and take away the livestock. You see that there's more farm killings, right? There is unemployment. Unemployment is going to rise because obviously people are moving away. If you have a business and you're employing 10 people, you are going to close down that business because there's less customers now, right? It will lead to more and more unemployment. It says there's few new investments, right? As an investor, if you see that people are moving away, you won't want to invest in businesses where there's no people there, right? Obviously, there's going to be less profits because when you invest in a business, you expect a return. Am I right? When people move away, we are going to be left with the very old and the very young, right? Very old and the very young, because the working population, right, moves to the urban area. So if you are left with old people and very young babies there, right, there'll be less production on the farms. There'll be less what? Production on the farms. Shops are going to close down. Schools are going to be empty. If you are from deep rural areas, I'm sure you can attest to this. There are schools which close down in rural areas. You see the school is very new, right? But already it has closed down because there's less children, there's less people in rural areas, right? And that some of the consequences which are not which I didn't mention here is family ties are also going to be broken, right? You see parents leaving their children and grandparents to work in urban areas, right? So those family ties are going to be broken, right? Remember I spoke about production decreasing because we are left with old people and babies, right? The economy will also be affected because the production decreases due to that because there will be less people as laborers, right? And then basic services such as shops and schools would close down due to a decrease in the number. And this also affects the economy of the area, right? Now, even our resources are going to be underutilized because there's less people to use them. You see that those are some of the consequences. It can even lead to what we call brain drain, right? When we lose skilled professionals. Remember, people who are skilled, people who are educated will move away to urban areas to find jobs. You see that? Leaving the rural area as a with a brain drain, right? It has less people behind who are educated, right? Which will lead to the economy declining, right? Less economic growth. Okay. Now, now remember, rural urban migration does not only affect the rural area; it also affects the urban area, right? It also affects the urban area, right? You need to understand that when people move from the rural area, they live there, right? The migrants leave home with a perception of the city life based on what they see on the radio, magazines, and TV, even on TikTok, right? Yes, they think that when they get there, they'll get a job, they'll drive a nice car, but the realities are always different, right? But why is the reality different, right? The reality is often different because migrants often have little money and they end up living with friends and relatives in informal settlements or on the streets until they can establish themselves, right? And the local government cannot feed the demand, the growing demand of housing on the urban area. There's more people moving there, right? There's more demand for housing. The government cannot cater for everyone, right? People earn low salaries and cannot pay for formal housing. Remember, when they got here, they thought they would get more money, but most of these people are unskilled, most of them. So obviously, they'll earn less money and they won't be able to afford formal housing. So those bright lights which were attracting them, they may never get to experience them, right? um there's lack of job opportunities, right? Remember, there's too many people moving there now. Obviously the jobs won't be enough for everyone, right? If you lack of they even lack qualifications, right, to be competitive in the job market. You see that they'll end up maybe working in a taxi rank, right? Something which does not require a lot of skills. Okay, so these are the consequences. Remember, there's also going to be more crime now. There's more people who are unemployed, right? The city is crowded, that increases crime, right? Remember, I spoke about more demand for housing, right? There won't be enough houses to accommodate everyone. That's how you start getting informal settlements, okay? There's overcrowding. When there's overcrowding, diseases can spread easier, okay? Diseases can spread what? Easier. Think about COVID-19, right? When we had to uh, quarantine. How can you quarantine when there's so many people in the city, right? It's easier for diseases to just spread. Okay, sorry. There's going to be more and more pollution, right? You can see here there's a lot of pollution, even land pollution. If you go to the Johannesburg CBD, you will see exactly how dirty it looks, right? It's not like how you see it on the TV. There's going to be a lot of traffic. I'm sure you've experienced this in urban areas, right? There's a lot of traffic. There's traffic congestion, right? And remember, I spoke about unemployment because there's more and more people looking for jobs now, right? More and more people looking for jobs. Now, in geography, we look at the cause, right? We look at the impact, the consequence. And then lastly, we look at strategies to fix the problem. We don't just focus on the problem, right? We also look for strategies, right, to fix, right? Number one, we said we can advertise right now. Look, let's advertise our rural area, right? Let's make it attractive to our tourists, right? So that we can boost the economy of our rural areas, right? Recreation, let's have more parks, right? Let's improve the rural area by creating more facilities, right? Yes, to boost tourism. We can restore some of these buildings, right? We can have more schools in rural areas, right? We can make it attractive again so that people can go back to the rural area. We can provide skills training courses, right, to train the farmers in that rural area. By doing that, people can remain there so that we don't have too many people in our urban areas. Okay. We can also provide basic service. Remember all the things which were lacking in our rural area. We can just improve them. You can see that's the cheat code. Just improve whatever was missing. We said there's poor transport facilities in our rural area. We can improve roads and transport facilities. See, that's a strategy to keep people there, right? And land reform should be accelerated to enable the poor and landless to obtain land for farming, right? We can give people back the land so they can use it for farming, okay? We can provide capital for farmers in our rural area, right? We provide what? Farmers. Sorry, capital for farmers. We can create more job opportunities. You said there's less job opportunities. We can create more job opportunities maybe by opening more businesses, right? We can improve the working conditions. Remember, they had low salaries. We give them more salaries. We improve the salaries, okay? Okay, in rural areas, right, you can use farming practices that can cope with the change in climate, right? Using more drought-resistant crops, right, etc., etc. And then, okay, these are what you need to know, right? What you need to know on this topic. Definition, obviously, know how to define rural-urban migration, the causes, your push and pull factors, right? Our centrifugal and centripetal forces, the consequences and the strategies, right, to reduce rural urban migration or to reduce rural depopulation. Okay. Okay, I spoke about rural urban migration and how it causes rural depopulation, right? It's very important to know how to define rural depopulation. This is the decrease in the number of people living where? In rural areas, right? There's a graph. It's very important to analyze these graphs, okay? From this graph here, you can see that there is a little key, a little legend, right? The green is for our rural population, right? From 1940 up until 2010. The red is for our urban population. You can see the urban population is increasing, right? Urban population is increasing. And since the graph is about rural depopulation, you can see that these percentages are showing us, right, how much the rural population is decreasing, okay? Let's do another past paper activity, right? From June 2024. 1.3 says refer to the graph and cartoon below showing rural urban migration, right? Predict differences in the percentage increase of people that move from rural to urban areas between 2000 and 2030, okay? So we have these countries here, we have all its continents, right? We have Asia, Africa, Europe, South America, and America in 2000, right? And in 2030, same continents again, okay? If we analyze there, we can see that with Asia in the 2000s, right, 37% of people living in urban areas, right? And then in around 2030, it is predicted to have 50% of the people living where? In urban areas. Africa was also 37% in urban areas, but by 2030, it's predicted to be around 54%, right? So there's been a huge jump for these two countries. But obviously, you can see Africa has more people who are now expected to live in urban areas, which is 54%. If you look at these countries, Europe, right, it went from 73 to 80, right? It's not a big jump, right? It's just 7% more, right? Even with this one here, South America from 76 to 85, North America from 79% to 84%. So they also have more people moving to urban areas, but it's not a big jump like Africa and Asia, where Africa has the biggest jump from 37 to 54. If you count there, 54 minus 37, it's like a 17% jump, right? So Africa has more people moving to urban areas, right? Remember, it's an LEDC, right? 1.3.1 says, oh no, before we go there, there's also a cartoon there. You can see that this person wants to go to the urban area, right, for better jobs in the city, okay? You can see that in the city we have more industries, there is more pollution, factories, okay. 1.3.1 says, which continent is predicted or expected to have the highest percentage of people that will move to urban areas, right? We have analyzed, we can see that Africa is the one, right, which has the highest percentage of people that will move to urban areas. I know that most people, you are going to choose this one, 85%. That's the common mistake you're going to make. They want to know which one will have the highest percentage of people moving. How do you determine that? You look at the 2000s, right? You see how much it has increased. This one here, I can see that Europe, South America, and North America already had high percentages, right? But remember, now we want to know by how much did it increase, right? It didn't increase a lot. This one went from 74 to 84, right? I think that's like what, 5%. So the increase is not a lot. But if you look at Africa, it went from 37 to 54. That's 17%. Okay. That's how you determine which one has increased a lot. You don't just look at the ones with a high number. These ones are already high, right? They just added like 5, 6, or 8%. But with Africa, you see, they added 17%. So Africa has to be the one, right, which has more people who have moved to urban areas, right? It's Africa. Right? Most people were going to choose this 85% without analyzing the graph properly. Okay, number 1.3.2, determine the predicted difference in the temperature, right? Sorry, in the percentage of people that would have moved, right? They are referring to Africa. Now, how many people have moved? They said answer to question 1.3.1, right? You want to know the predicted percentage of people that would have moved, right? We'll take this 54% minus the 37%, you get a 17%, right? So if your answer was wrong, if you chose South America, it means even your answer for 1.3.2 was going to be wrong. But you see, we even put stars here because we know that with this question, most people are going to get it wrong. Okay, you can see here there's a big jump from 37 to 54. So Africa is the one which is the highest percentage of people that would move, right? 1.3.3, why is the rate of urbanization of this continent so high, right? Why is there an increase in the number of people in urban areas, right? Why is the rate of urbanization so high? Remember, in Africa, there's a lot of people who are still in rural areas, right? So obviously, there's a lot of people in rural areas. We have more people who are going to move away from the rural area to the urban area. You see that? Whereas these countries, North America, there's less people in rural areas. If there's less people in rural areas, it means there's less people who would move to the urban area, right? But in Africa, since there's a lot of people in rural areas, right, there's going to be more and more people going to the urban area, right? So the rate of urbanization will be higher, right? You see, most people in Africa still live in rural areas, right? 2 marks. Second 2 marks, there are more push factors in rural areas of Africa, right? Since people are still in rural areas, there'll be push factors, the ones we spoke about. And obviously, there'll be more people who will go to our urban areas, increasing the rate of urbanization, right? Number one, you must talk about more people still in rural areas, okay? And they are going to move away because of push factors, okay? They're going to move to our urban areas, rural urban migration. And then they are going to cause a high rate of urbanization. You get your 4 marks. 1.3.4. Why does the push factor indicated by the cartoon often lead to disappointment? Remember, I spoke about expectations, what people expect when they get to the city, and the realities are not always the same, right? Realities are not always the same, right? It says here, people do not have the skills to obtain employment, right? This guy here, right, he wants to move to the urban area, but you'll find that he doesn't have the skills required to be competitive in the job market, right? You see that? So his reality won't be the same. He thinks he's going to get better job opportunities, but maybe he doesn't even have skills for employment, right? It says that there are not enough jobs available for them, right? Remember, if more and more people move to urban areas, right, there won't be enough jobs for every single person. You see that? They do not have the necessary documentations or qualifications, right? So when they get there, they won't be able to get formal employment, right? If they don't have qualifications, if they're not qualified, right? There is less access to information on employment, opportunities. Employment opportunities, okay. There's lack of money for transport costs, right? For transport what? Costs. They lack appropriate work clothing, right? You know, when you go for an interview, you need to dress to impress. 1.3.5 suggest strategies, right? That could be implemented in rural areas to reduce the rate of urbanization, right? So if you want people less people to be in urban areas, what can you do, right? You can encourage decentralization. When you see decentralization of businesses, it means that businesses should not be centralized in the urban area. We can move some of the businesses into rural areas, right? By doing that, obviously, people will remain in the rural area. Okay, then there will be less people going to urban areas. We can create job opportunities in the rural area. See, when you do that now, there won't be a lot of people going to the urban area, right? We can improve infrastructure in our rural area. By doing this, obviously, people will remain there, right? We can provide basic services, right? Remember, we said when we spoke about the push factors, we said there's poor service delivery there, right? We can create tourist attractions, effective policing, and promote rural areas through cultural, sporting events. We can improve our recreational facilities in our rural areas, right? We can have more entertainment facilities. By doing all of this, people will remain in the rural area, so we won't have, right, a high rate of urbanization. We won't have a lot of people in urban areas, right? So the key there is to improve the rural area so people can remain there. So that some of the people can even be attracted to the rural area and go back there, so that we don't have a lot of people in our urban areas, right? In our urban what? Areas. Um, let's look at another past paper, right? This is a prelim paper from 2023, right? Same concept, rural urban migration. Okay, I have the questions and the responses on the side. 1.3.1, study the cartoon that is based on rural urban migration. It's very important to study the diagram. You can see that this is a rural area, it's a remote area. They're saying there's drought, there's poor harvest, there's poor housing. But look at the urban area there, right? With tall buildings, it says money, job, school, wealth, houses, food, it is modern. See, these are all the things which are attracting people, right, to the urban area, right? But in the rural area, we have all the push factors, the unfavorable conditions, okay? 1.3.1, define rural urban migration, right? It is the movement of who? Of people from where to where? From rural areas to urban areas, right? Don't say movement from rural areas. Movement of who? Movement of people from where to where? From rural areas to urban areas. You get your 2 marks. Give one push factor visible on the cartoon. Don't try and give us other push factors which are not here, right? It must be visible on the cartoon. There is poor harvest. It's written there, poor harvest, right? There is drought, right? They are saying it's a remote location, it's a remote area, right? There is poor housing, right? If you even analyze this, you can see there's potholes all over here, right? There's potholes, any one of them, right? It's a push factor, it's unfavorable, okay? 1.3.3 says account for the impact that push factors mentioned in 1.3.2 will have on the rural area. Now we are accounting, we are explaining, right, the impact of this push factor. Poor harvest. Number one, we spoke about the poor harvest, right? Now we are accounting, we are explaining poor harvest will lead to less income being generated. Remember, if we have more crops, you can sell them, right? Poor harvest leads to unemployment, right? If there's drought in the area, you can't farm a lot of crops, you won't need a lot of farmers, right? So obviously it can lead to unemployment. Drought, we spoke about drought. People leave rural areas to go and search for new opportunities, right? Because obviously it is little to no rainfall, right? There will be less crop production. Now people lose their jobs. Now they have to move to rural areas. So they have to move to urban areas for better or new job opportunities. Now if it's a remote area, right, it's away from services, that is not enough social activities, there's poor service delivery, okay? Those are the impacts of that push factor. Poor housing, leads to limited services, right? You'd find that the whole community is sharing one tap, right? There's lack of electricity there, okay? And then potholes, right? Potholes, the road quality degrades because of poor maintenance, okay? Account for the impact of the push factor, right? These are the impacts of the push factors we have accounted, right? We have accounted. Now, 1.3.4, now we have to predict the social impact. Social refers to people. Economic refers to money. Environmental refers to nature, right? The physical environment. Now we are saying social impact of rural urban migration, right? Social, think about people. How will rural urban migration affect the people, right? 1.3.4. 1.3.4. What's happening now? 1.3.4, predict the social impact of rural urban migration. An influx of people, right, can put a strain on urban infrastructure, okay? Remember, we are predicting the social impact where? On the urban area, okay? Not on the rural area, but on the urban area, right? There's going to be an influx of people. It's going to be overpopulated, right? So obviously there's going to be more pressure on resources, more pressure on urban infrastructure. For example, there won't be enough housing to accommodate everyone, right? There's a strain of services. Remember, it leads to overpopulation now. There's too many people than the available resources, okay? It says you can even give an example, okay? It can lead to an increase in congestion. There's more traffic congestion. Remember, there's more and more people now in urban areas. Remember, we're looking at the impact on urban areas. Traffic congestion also affects people. Remember, there's longer waiting time, right? Even for medical care, right? Remember, there's a lot of people now in urban areas. You find long queues in clinics, public clinics, and public what? Hospitals, right? Shortage of housing, we spoke about this, can result in less job opportunities or unemployment. Remember when these people went to urban areas, they thought there's going to be more jobs, but when they get there, there's just too many people, right? And then there won't be enough job opportunities for everyone, okay? There is a lack of, there's a risk of urban decay or urban blight, right? Yes, remember these people can occupy buildings illegally, right? Yes, leading to the degradation of an urban area, right? So any two of those we have spoken about, right? Another social impact you can think about there, maybe it's crime, right? There's going to be more crime in our urban areas, right? More what? Crime, because there's more people there and these people are unemployed, okay? 1.3.5 suggest two strategies a government can implement so that people can stay in the rural. We want them to stay in the rural areas to avoid all these problems, right? The government can invest in improving rural infrastructure, right? Can improve the roads. Look at these roads, there's potholes all over here, right? Right, there's poor housing, right? I'm not seeing any power lines here, right? So the government can improve all the infrastructure so that people can remain in the rural areas, right? We can improve access to basic services in rural areas, right? Like water, right? Electricity, right? Better infrastructure can attract business investment in rural areas. You see, once they improve the infrastructure, even more businesses, right, would want to situate there, right? More investment can create more job opportunities. You see, the government, if they invest in the rural areas, maybe by having more businesses, it can create job opportunities even in rural areas, so people can remain there, right? Business can provide incentives for businesses in rural areas so that now businesses will be encouraged, okay, to operate there in rural areas. Skills development programs in rural areas, right? Maybe for farming methods, right? We can improve and better our farming what practices. These are some of the strategies that government can do what can implement. They can even have more entertainment facilities, right? There's more. Okay. Okay, now we are moving on to social justice issues, right? Now we need to know how to define these concepts, right? Social justice. What is social justice? Right? Social justice is about creating equal opportunity and meeting the basic needs of people, right? Social justice, right? Creating equal opportunity and meeting the basic needs of people, right? We know there are a lot of social justice issues in rural settlements, right? We have slow land reform, which we are going to dive into today. We have slow what? Land reform. There's poverty, there's depopulation, there's lack of job opportunities, right? There's lack of services, limited investment, right? People in rural areas are living in adjacent poverty there, right? They are excluded from economic activities. Now, before we dive into this topic, you need to understand that even though most of the injustices in rural areas are because of past policies, okay, geography is not history. So let's know when we're answering, right? Yes, we can mention like past policies, but let's not focus a lot on history because this topic learners tend to focus more on debating, talking about historical events, and they forget how to define concepts like land reform, land restitution. Okay, so let's try to be objective when we deal with this topic. We all know about the issue of land in the country. As you can see from this image on the side, right, we have our black South Africans, right? They are striking there. You can see the posters are saying land must fall, the land is ours, farmers must fall. Okay. All right. Now let's dive into this topic of land reform, right? What is land reform, right? Now, land reform, right? Its purpose is to bring about equitable distribution and access to land, right? Land reform is all about bringing what? Equitable distribution and access to land, because we know that in South Africa most of the land is in the hands of the minority, right? Of the minority. If you in the hands of a few people, where most of the black South Africans are suffering because they don't have access to don't have land. Okay, so now land reform rests upon three pillars in post-apartheid South Africa, right? Now it rests along this land restitution, land redistribution, and land turnout reform. Okay, let's understand. Land reform is about bringing what? Equitable distribution and access to land. Okay, it rests upon these three pillars: land restitution, land redistribution, and land what? Turnout reform. Okay, we know about the issue of land in our country. From this side, they are saying land reform, right? Injustices of apartheid, where people were forcibly removed from their land, are being addressed, right? So we are bringing about a more equitable distribution to access to land. That's what it's all about, right? Now, I said it rests on these three pillars: land restitution, land redistribution, and land turnout reform, right? Let's go over them because it's very important to know how to define and even understand them, right? Land restitution is about bringing back the land. It's about returning the land to its original owner, right? It compensates those who lost the land during apartheid. So we are returning the land back to those who lost their land during what? Apartheid. Okay. Land restitution, it is a process of compensating people for the land they lost, right, due to forced removals during what? Apartheid, right? This is done when they are given another piece of land or they are paid out, right? So it's basically about returning the land or compensating them or paying them. Okay. Land restitution, returning the land. Okay, returning the land to its original owners, right, or compensating them for land they lost during apartheid, right? And then land redistribution, right? When you're distributing now, it's like you are giving it back, right? It's like you are sharing the land, right? Land redistribution is aimed at providing previously disadvantaged people with land for residential and for farming purposes, right? For farming what? Purposes. Now it says the government buys the land and makes it available to previously what? Disadvantaged people, right? To previously disadvantaged people. With restitution, right? People make claims for land they lost, right? And is returned to its original owners, or they can be compensated. With redistribution, the government buys the land and makes it available to the previously disadvantaged people, right? Normally for farming purposes, so they can use it for farming, right? And improve what economic growth, right? To alleviate poverty. Now, land channel reform team, right? Think about tenants here. Think about what? Tenants. This one is to secure the rights of those living on land owned by others, right? It's about protection of rights, right? You are protected from eviction, right? Land channel reform, it is designed to provide security, right, to all South Africans that in terms of land ownership. It recognizes communal rights and the rights of tenants, mainly in white-owned farms, right? This one simply prevents unfair eviction of tenants from land that they have been occupying for a very long time, right? Land tenure reform is about securing the rights, right? Securing the rights of those living in land owned by others, right? It protects you from eviction, right? If you have been living on that land for a very long time. Okay, now there are challenges to doing this, to giving people back the land, right? Now, one of the challenges is the willing buyer-seller clause, right? Some people are not willing to sell the land, okay? So it makes processes quite lengthy, okay? It is an expensive process. The entire process of bringing back the land is expensive. Remember, the government has to buy back the land, okay? And then provide it to previously disadvantaged people. Okay, it's a very long process. It's a lengthy process, right? If you know our South African government, anything that has to do with the government is very long. It's a lengthy process. Okay, it says the farming is still subsistence. Okay, farming is still what? Subsistence. Remember, when these people are giving back the land, right? We want them, or they want them, to move from subsistence farming to commercial farming, right? So they can contribute to economic growth. Remember, subsistence farming, now this one here, you are farming for your family. For your what? For your family. So obviously, as a government, they want more commercial farming, which is farming for a profit, right? That improves to the economic growth of a country. So one of the problems there with providing people with land is that they remain as subsistence farmers now. Like they don't shift from commercial farming, right? So that leads to no economic growth. You see that? If giving you back the land is going to lead to a decline in the economy, so now that's a challenge, it's a problem, right? There are claim disputes, right? There are claim what? Disputes. You'll find that maybe your grandfather now, your great grandfather was owning a piece of land, and now 10 of you in that family are now claiming it, right? And then what if 10 of you get that land? So that land now is going to be owned by 10 people. It is going to be fragmented, right? You know, when land is fragmented, that reduces what? Um, can also reduce profits. Okay, there's a lot of disputes around the whole giving back the land process. There's no knowledge on farming, right? You'll give people land. Some people can get back the land, and then you find that they have no knowledge on farming, right? They have poor knowledge, right? Some of them are not even interested in being farmers, right? We know that will affect the economy of our country because agriculture contributes a lot to our gross domestic what? Products, right? Our new owners are not trained. Our new owners are not what? Trained. Okay. There can also be disagreements between governments and traditional leaders in terms of restoring land to what? Communities. Okay, because we know that in most rural areas, our traditional leaders also have a lot of influence in terms of land ownership. Okay. Um, Here's another past paper activity from a prelim from Northwest in 2024, right? There's an extract on land reform. It says there is a widespread agreement that land reform in South Africa has failed to deliver the changes, right? Racially based dislocation and land dispossession were central features of colonial request and apartheid rule. To redress this, in 1994, the newly elected ANC set a target of redistributing 30% of the country's white-owned agricultural land to black people, right? Persistently failing to come to this goal, the government now hopes to reach it to show that South Africa's land reform program is misguided. It is designed for a socio-economic context that doesn't exist. It ignores three important factors, right? Land has multiple uses other than production. Small rural farmers aren't purely economic actors who are self-reliant. Family and community obligations create financial pressure and that can force small rural farmers to stop production and fall into poverty. Okay. Question 1, 3.1 says define the term land reform, right? Land what? Reform, right? Here's the definition here. It is the process of redressing injustices of displacement and forced removals that took place during what? Apartheid, right? Now, in simple terms, you can just say that it is about bringing equitable distribution and access to land to previously disadvantaged people who were in South Africa. Okay, we are redressing injustices of the past, right? By giving people back the land or access to what? Land. 3.2 says quote, right? We are quoting. Quote, three important factors from the extract. The South Africa's land reform program is ignored. It is what? Ignored. Okay, now when you quote, please just include those quotation marks because the examiners can be quite stubborn at times. Okay, include those quotation marks. One of the factors that the program ignored was that land has multiple uses other than production, right? They speak about it here. Okay, it says that it ignores three important factors and then it provides those three factors. Land has multiple uses for production. Small scale farmers aren't purely what? Economic actors who are self-reliant. Family and community obligations create pressure. You see, those are the three important factors which were ignored. And if you read this extract, you can see it even says there are three it ignores three important factors and then they are provided. So I don't see a reason why someone would get this one wrong. Okay. 1.1.3 provide one reason why land reform is necessary in South Africa. Why is it necessary? Right? Remember, we are redressing injustices of the past. Right? Injustice what of the past. Right? It is for national reconciliation also. Remember now we are trying to reconcile, right? To forgive our oppressors. Okay, national reconciliation and stability in the country. It can promote economic growth. Remember, we're giving back people the land. They can use it for farming, right, and gain a profit. Okay, it is to alleviate poverty as well. Okay, let's read some of the answers which were provided from the memo. Provide one reason why land reform is necessary, right, to promote economic growth. Remember, we want to shift away from subsistence to commercial farming, right? Economic growth of who? Of people who were disadvantaged in the past during apartheid, right? It is to create self-sufficient farmers. Self-sufficient what? Farmers to redress the injustices from the past, right? Remember, we were fairly disadvantaged when in the past, right? The legacy of apartheid predominated over unfair distribution of land, and land reform sets out to correct these injustices, right? It is addressing injustices of the past. It is meant to make sure that there's national reconciliation, right? It's like we forgive each other for what happened during the apartheid era when people were forced to move out from their land. Okay, it is to promote food production in the previously marginalized sectors of population, okay, where black people used to live. It will help people to have access to land to alleviate, right, poverty. Okay, so that you could have chosen one of them, right? Why land reform is so important? Why is it important to ensure equitable distribution and access to land, right? To promote economic growth, to redress injustices of the past, right? For national reconciliation, so we can forgive one another, right? And so we can have a stable country. Okay. 1.1.4 says um okay, 1.3.4 says explain two challenges associated with land reform and that cause the government not to achieve its goal, right? Its goal of providing equal access to land, right? What are those challenges? Okay, some of the challenges that the government faces that it is a very costly process. Remember, it has to buy back the land in some cases, right? So it is a very costly process. We know it also takes a lot of time, right? The willing seller buyer causes delays in negotiating prices, right? You find that the seller is not willing to sell the land, right? It takes time to resolve disputes for the land. Okay, there's another one, right? There are a lot of gray areas or gaps in policies, right, about land reform, right, which can make the process a bit lengthy and time consuming. And you know, there's a lack of training and support for new farmers, right? It doesn't make sense to get a large piece of land when you don't know what to do with it, right? There's a lack of support and guidance for new farmers, right? It can be disagreements also between the government and traditional leaders. No, traditional leaders also have an influence on the land, right? Um, it says then from our case study, we say South Africa's land reform program is misguided, right? It is designed for socio-economic context that does not exist, right? And then 1.3.5 says, explain two methods that the government can put in place to assist people that have been relocated, right? Remember, now we can create a market area for trading, right, for them. They have a market area where they can sell whatever they've grown in their new land, okay? They can establish educational centers to provide skills development for the new owners, right? And they can monitor and evaluate progress now, right? Yes, they can also have training and development in modern farming methods, right? They can be mentored. The new farmers can be mentored. There are a lot of things in which they can do to assist the new farmers, okay? So to end the video, let me drop some wisdom, right? Let me motivate. What you put in, you will get out, right? So the effort you choose today shapes the results you will live with tomorrow. So metric class of 2026, stay disciplined, stay consistent, and trust the process. Your future is built by what you do daily, not occasionally. Okay, so let's be consistent.